We can now bring in Andrew Smith, a lecturer and French historian at Queen Mary University of London. Thank you so much for joining the program today, Andrew.
Thank you.
Now, as we heard, Le Cornu had promised he wouldn't do this. He wouldn't invoke this article, and he conceded that he regretted having to do it. So why is the French government using Article 49.3 to pass the budget at this point? And what sort of political risks is this going to create for Le Cornu and the government?
Well, I think there were 350 plus reasons for using the using this mechanism, the 49.3, and that was all of those hours, 350 hours plus spent of parliamentary time debating how to pass this budget. It seems like Groundhog Day again, the same discussions, the same objections, and really I think the commitment depended on an ability to try and find some compromise. And ultimately, I think that was what was achieved. We heard this new phrase, the negotiated 49.3, and it relied really on the fact that Le Cornu, the Prime Minister, was able to essentially get some sort of leverage from the socialists, that he was able to give a little bit of ground in terms of their demands for the budget, such that he was able to essentially secure a non-censorship agreement from them, I should say. Now, look, people are saying that the far right says the budget is too socialist. The far left says the budget is too right-wing. Now, ultimately, that reflects the parliamentary logics of this three-way divided parliament. But it also says that perhaps it's doing something which is walking that centrist line, which it pretends to try and do. The socialists certainly didn't get everything they wanted. Of course, the far left are saying they've been bought out and all the rest of it. They didn't achieve everything they wanted in terms of their alternative budget, but they did manage to actually move things forward a little. The centre-right said that France avoided a fiscal heresy, but importantly, Laurent Wauquiez said this wasn't worth bringing down the government over. There has been some advance, and at this stage, a budget is better than no budget. We're not there yet, but mid-February might be the moment when we start to see France actually passing a budget, actually moving forward, and getting that stability it needs for development.
Now, Andrew, there's been some discussion that we can expect more motions of no confidence to follow what's happened today. Do you think that's likely?
I would say it's virtually a stick-on. It's one of the immediate recourses from the very divided opposition. I think the votes that came in last week were the most likely, if any, to have succeeded. We saw that the motion of censure that was put together by the collected left wing, from the far left to the Greens, really excluding just the socialists, was 269, I think, votes, so just shy, about 20 shy of an overall majority, which would have brought down the government. I think that was the most likely to have succeeded. It didn't. It did not succeed, and I would imagine now, unless there are new political fireworks yet to come, that this will now move through quite a similar range of discussions, really reflecting that frozen nature of the debate. If the negotiation of the budget in the first instance seemed like Groundhog Day, I think we'll see this same Groundhog Day of motions of censure being defeated and the government stumbling forward to pass this budget.
Now, Andrew, you touched on this a little bit when you mentioned, the socialists had managed to get a couple of things that they wanted, and the parties are sort of using this opportunity also to maybe air some grievances. So what other challenges are the opposition parties using during this current budget crisis to challenge the government position?
Well, there's lots of different attempts to, paint this as being something that's being pushed by Emmanuel Macron to use and manipulate his unpopularity in the wider press. We're seeing a lot of that from the far right, who really want to kind of play the president as the key opponent and paint any compromise with this. We see that from the far left as well. Of course, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, he's been criticising others, not just in the government, but also others in trade unions like the CFDT, for, kind of going along with some of these in terms of being social partners to the government's project. So really there's a lot of leverage being put on different social partners attached to the government, but also trying to associate this with an unpopular president at the same time. This really reflects the fact that many people, many politicians are still looking forward to the upcoming municipal elections and then thereafter to the presidential elections and all that will follow with that. But as we've seen only in the last week, I think global politics teaches us that there is never something we can assume that there will be a quiet run-in and everything will go as expected. There's a lot yet to come before that presidential election, and I think a lot more discussions to be had in terms of actually passing this budget. But for the moment, we're on track for mid-February, only a month and a half behind, for a budget which Sébastien Lecornu is presenting as tax stability intended to achieve modest deficit reduction and try and keep France, competing on its international commitments, keep it, complying with what it can in Europe, and keep it working with its international partners while not causing more domestic ructions.
Now, Andrew, this budget should have been passed before the end of the year. It's nearing the end of January. So what could happen to France's economy if this budget crisis continues?
Well, one of the big issues we often see, we've seen Emmanuel Macron criticising, for example, the European Central Bank in terms of its interest rates. France has fairly low inflation. It's had decent, if very modest, growth numbers come through. And there is, I think, a desire to ensure that France's deficit does not grow exponentially. Of course, the target for deficit reduction was about a year ago. They wanted it down to 4.7%, certainly down below 3.4% by 2029. They've kind of moved on that a little bit. It needs to be around 5% is what they're going for with this budget. Now, there are some in the centre right who have their suspicions this might not succeed. In the Horizon group, for example, are very, very sceptical about whether or not that will happen. And one of the big things that always people need to look out for in terms of international markets and all the rest of it is really the spread between France and Germany, looking at how those deficits move, looking at how the economies move and track. And that's not an alarming place at the moment. France is moving along long term. It wants to reduce its deficit. But I mean, look, France reducing its deficit, François Hollande spoke about that, Sarkozy spoke about that, even Chirac spoke about that. It's been increasing since the 80s, but it's only been since the mid-2000s that it kind of took off in a different direction from Germany. So it's always that relationship between France and Germany and understanding those ideas of credit splits and how they track that I think is important. France is in no great danger right now, but it has to keep that kind of budgetary kind of discipline not to continue growing a deficit, which becomes unmanageable. After all, it means that you spend more money servicing borrowing, so spending 7 billion euros on interest payments instead of, for example, investing 7 billion euros in France. And that's the logic that's driving much of the kind of budgetary policy which Sébastien Lecornu has been pursuing.
Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us on the program. That's Andrew Smith, a French historian and lecturer at Queen Mary University of London.